All right. So this is the first question. So what do you teach? What is the demographic of the students you teach?
Um, I feel like every semester I get something different.
Mm-hmm.
So most semesters I have one of the freshman composition, the first year writing.
Mm-hmm.
I usually end up with 120. So
Yeah.
those tend to be first year students.
Mm-hmm.
In the fall, it's like, the students who are brand new to the university. And then in the spring, it tends to be, the 120 in the spring tends to be more transfer students, but
Mm-hmm.
not all.
Yeah.
So I have that, but like last semester I had a graduate class, and then
Mm-hmm.
the last couple years I've been teaching the English core courses, so that's freshmen and sophomores. Occasionally I teach a 400 level, so those are juniors and seniors.
Just kind of anything and everything.
Yeah, I mean everything from the freshmen to the graduate students.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a range.
Yeah, just everything. The second question is, what are your experiences teaching students with disabilities in your classroom? And I know, like, especially in college, it might be a lot different from, say a regular high school teacher, because in college you deal with, you do deal with students with disabilities, but not as many as like a regular high school teacher. So
yeah, it's probably a different range than you would in high school.
Yeah.
I feel like over the last few years, I've had more and more students who who identify as on the autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I've had students with vision problems.
Mm-hmm.
Those tended to be the ones I get most often.
Mm-hmm.
The accommodations that people are, the accommodations I see most often is time and a half testing.
Yeah.
But we don't have tests in writing classes.
Yeah.
So that's because I should say, all the classes I have are, they're all writing classes.
Mm-hmm.
There's time and a half testing doesn't really apply to us. There's some with people who need to sit in the front row. It's that sort of accommodation. That's easy. I see a lot of people who need to have. I'm trying to think. It's phrased as note taking, but it means that they get the materials and notes from the class within 24 hours,
mm-hmm.
and posting the class PowerPoints covers that.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of like your range of accommodations.
Well, that's what I've had. I had, let's see, I had a student one semester who I think the student said that he was legally blind. It's been a few years.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have to get the PowerPoints to that student before the class so that he could enlarge them. He had a big tablet and would
mm-hmm.
enlarge things and follow along during class.
Yeah.
That one, flexible attendance and flexible deadlines come up sometimes.
Yeah.
But those are generally, they haven't been too much, they're not that hard to accommodate.
Yeah. Okay. So the third question is, what do you feel your biggest challenge in teaching students with disabilities?
I'm trying to think. I think the thing that comes up sometimes is particularly with the flexible deadlines and the flexible attendance,
mm-hmm.
And particularly with students who are earlier in their college careers,
mm-hmm.
if you have that kind of accommodation, you have to take the responsibility of if you miss class, you still have to do the work. So, if your accommodation gives you flexible attendance, that's great, but you're still responsible for doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
And if, you have, your accommodation gives you flexible deadlines, you still have to talk to your professor in advance before the deadline, and you still have to do the work. So it doesn't mean that, and you still have to do it in a reasonable enough time that you can keep going with the rest of the class, so your work doesn't snowball all semester. It doesn't mean you don't do the work. It just means if you need an extra few days. So getting people, or how do I say this, encouraging students to take responsibility for you can have a flexible deadline, but you still have to do it. And you've gotta, if you're gonna take those deadlines, you have to be able to plan, to plan your work and know that, okay, I pushed this deadline back in this class and this one in this class. So that can be challenging because I feel like with some students it often snowballs into, well, now I don't have time to do the work, so I'm just not going to hand things in. So it becomes not like an accommodation, it becomes a liability.
Yeah, like the issue isn't giving them time, it's just trusting that they're going to be responsible, you know?
Yeah, or, I mean, like, that they're welcome to the time, but it requires an additional level of responsibility that when everybody else is following a class path with deadlines, because you know, like, you structure a class where this thing is due, so it's done and out of the way, and now we build on it for the next thing. But if you are taking extensions on everything, then you don't have that deadline to or that baseline to move on to the next assignment. So it just makes it harder for those students to keep moving through the class.
Let me see the next question. Do you feel like, sorry, mostly all these questions have to do with like students with disabilities, but like how mainly does like a student's disability like affect your like in-class instruction? I
feel like it doesn't normally. I mean, and I think in other types of classes it could. I think, you know, if, like, I know several professors this semester who have, like, they have an ASL translator in class, and something like that I think would definitely, but I haven't had that before. Okay, it's okay.
Stop sitting on the floor. She's done this before. She drives me crazy.
It's all good.
I'm sorry.
It's more comfortable.
Not your fault. It's her fault.
It's more comfortable than the chair in there, so. Yeah, I mean, I guess it hasn't, you know, aside, like, you know, the student that needed the PowerPoint before class meant I couldn't finish it 2 minutes before class, but that was no. I think it doesn't change anything, or for me, well, with the accommodations I've had, it hasn't changed anything.
Okay, so based on your experience, what works best when teaching these students with disabilities? Have you had someone to like reach out and ask for like an accommodation, and you found like you've taken that accommodation with you?
I mean, having to get the PowerPoints up within 24 hours, I didn't, you know, like years and years ago when I was first teaching, this is my 9th year, this is my 18th semester at Westchester. So when I first started, you know, like I would have PowerPoints for some classes, but not all of them, and sometimes I would do notes on the board instead of on a PowerPoint. You know, like as class went on, I would write out the notes on the board. So now, you know, like now everything's on a PowerPoint, and I think I'm most classes better about getting things posted online. Sometimes it takes a little longer because I get caught up, but I think that's really the only. I think that's really the only thing that's, you know, like, I guess my pedagogy in my classes, they change every time I teach them anyway. But I think that's really the only thing that has been, I guess, has been driven by accommodating students.
You're familiar with like the concept of like literacy, right? Literacy development. Okay, so in what ways does your students' literacy development affect your teaching in the English subject? Well, I know obviously, like if you go into college being an English student, you're expected to be like at least a somewhat good writer and speaker and reader and all that, but have you found that some students have been like lacking in the area, even as a college student?
I guess, well, let me ask this, but when you're saying literacy, are you thinking of writing skills? Are you thinking of?
I'm thinking of writing and reading skills, kind of.
I feel like in the 201, the 201, 202, those classes and the first year writing classes, that like in those, well, in the first year writing classes, we spend a lot of time talking about, or at least in mine, we spend a lot of time talking about, you know, like, okay, like what is your writing process? Like what happens when you sit down? So getting people to think about, you know, about the steps they take and like the material parts of it. We spend more time on that because I think students don't always think about that. You know, like they think about these think about these really narrow, how do I say it, these really narrow, rigid genres,
Mhm.
and not like the flexibility of responding to pretty much any rhetorical situation they encounter. So I think we have to kind of like, reframe composition for them,
Yeah.
for, not just here's your 1 5-paragraph essay, but how do you write other things as well?
Mhm.
So I think that's, to some extent, maybe, having them think about literacy. If you're thinking about it on like the grammar level, we do, in all the freshman comp classes, we spend time talking about subject verb agreement,
Yeah.
and, how to structure a paragraph, and things
Mhm.
that I think probably should have been covered a little
Before
college. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's, people generally need a refresher on that.
Mhm.
I think the 201, 202, I'd say like more in 201, there's, I think it's some of that class is getting people thinking about how they read. So,
Mhm.
and that's, I think that's why I'm always asking you all, like,
Yeah.
all right, tell me what you underlined, tell me what was important out of
Mhm.
here, because I want you all to be able to read and pick those things out for yourself,
Yeah.
and not just wait for someone to tell you what's important.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that falls under.
I think it does.
Yeah, it falls under literacy.
Yeah. I remember, I don't know if this was yours class, but I feel like it was when I took the first English. What's the first class you're supposed
201?
to? 201. Something about like the 5-paragraph essay, and that was kind of like it was like a framework for like beginners, and we aren't beginners anymore, so we don't really need to follow that. And that's something I definitely understand what you're saying people need refreshers.
But it's a helpful framework. But
Yeah.
It's like in college, you need to
branch
take
out,
it, and now it's
yeah.
time to move beyond it.
Mhm.
So yeah, you probably either got that in one of your WRT classes or in 201.
Yeah. Okay. One of my next questions is, what is one thing you wish you learned in college about teaching students with learning disabilities?
Oh. I'm trying to think. So I was only an ed major for 1 semester as an undergrad.
Yeah.
And then I dropped it.
Yeah.
I was dual in chemistry and English.
Mhm.
And the classes were not interesting. So I guess I didn't really learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really learn anything about it as an undergrad.
Yeah.
And my grad program, so there was like one class to get you prepped for teaching. Like I was a high school and middle school teacher for a couple years, but
Yeah.
like I had an emergency certification, so it was like, go for it.
Yeah.
And then we had one class in grad school on how to teach. And that was more of like, how do you structure an assignment?
Yeah.
So I feel like I never got direct instruction in how to,
Yeah.
I never got direct instruction in like how to accommodate,
Yeah.
how to like tweak assignments. It was all, it was just all like on the fly.
Mhm.
And I also think that in the last 9 years, like since I started, because I guess I taught college level for 6 years in grad school too. So like in the last, 15 years, even the time I've been at Westchester, when I started, we rarely got a comment. Like
Yeah.
rare, it was so rare. Like you'd maybe get one a semester.
Mhm.
And now I usually have like between 4 and 5 per class.
Yeah.
Like in